right now. Okay, this is Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm here with Keith, and we're looking at Keith's first draft of his second assignment. Now, hang on. This is where this kind of switches on and off, I think, so you have to, there we go. Here's the question I would have, and it's coming up on everyone I'm seeing so far, is, I would just sort of say, it's a little general. Can we dig deeper? For example, in that story is mentioned a part of the brain that activates when you see the same, your group kind of thing. Okay, this is where this will become useful. I'm just going to pause and refer to the story. Let's just read this little bit of the video. The book, story, case study. Many children go through phases, of course, and virtually every teenager works hard to fit in with friends. During adolescence, teens who don't try to create a social life for themselves are the abnormal ones. It's not a sign of health at this age, but why do friendships become so important, particularly for girls as they hit puberty? Why do teens and tweens work so hard to fit in? And what can this teach us about empathy and the way it can disappear so completely when human groups conflict with one another? The vulnerability of young people to emotional contagion is well known. American culture is marinated in it, as trends in music, fashion, TV, movies, and other media are picked up and spread from one teen to another, hyped by an unprecedented global marketing machine. The popularity of the biggest celebrities relies heavily on their ability to attract adolescent interest and then capitalize on the copycatting that results from the teen longing to belong. A more extreme manifestation of teen susceptibility was what is now called mass psychogenic illness, formerly and less politically correct epidemic hysteria. In these cases, a few people suddenly developed unexplained symptoms, for example, epileptic fits, breaking out in hysterical laughter, or vomiting, which soon spreads to others nearby. The most common victims are teen and preteen girls. I think they were often regarded as one of the explanations, like long ago, was that they were witches. Do you know what I mean? This kind of behavior. So that's a kind of more malign view of it. Now, I'm just looking for the bit in the story that talks about specifically what is different in teenagers when they develop. That their brain, their frontal cortex is slower to develop than the impulse part of the brain, so that often consequences of behavior are not thought through. So this is what we're trying to find. But what is established is that there is a recognized behavior in pubescent girls of kind of grouping and wanting to belong to a group. And later in the story it explains some of the kind of evolutionary explanations of this behavior, which was survival and the care of offspring, because they needed to collaborate and cooperate in looking after their young and hunting, gathering. You could focus anywhere in this case study, but we're trying to follow a thread of an idea, which is trying to explain, why did Alison want to belong in a group so much? What explains that pubescent or prepubescent behavior, where this longing to belong, what are the theories underpinning that behavior, or attempts to explain that behavior? So what does all this have to do with teenage girls like Alison? If having female relatives and friends is necessary for the survival of your offspring, Being able to recruit such helpers is literally a matter of life or death. As girls become ready for reproduction, building a network of female supporters would then become almost as important as finding the right mate. From this perspective, the dramatic teenage world of cliques and BFFs, queen bees and wannabes makes a lot of sense. Girls would need to learn to cooperate in small groups to achieve success as mothers. This cooperation wouldn't take place automatically. Like other skills, it would take practice and would involve inevitable mistakes and misunderstandings. So after the section in the chapter where they talk about Solomon Asch's conformity experiment and Milgram's obedience experiment, I'll take it up from there. Given the ethic, now a lot has gone on before in this chapter to do with, as I repeat, studies done on different tribes and how different cultures, different tribes, even looking at chimps and gorillas and how they look after their young, and the marked difference in the collaborative approach to childcare that has sort of developed in human behaviour. But anyway, back to the gang and belonging to a group behaviour. So, given the ethical controversies of doing this type of research on adults, it has never been tried with teenagers or children. This is the Milgram and the Milgram specifically. But anyone who has ever been or raised a teenager will likely predict even more conformity and less resistance to social pressure to do harm among adolescents. Virtually all of us can recall doing something with a group of teenagers that we would never have done alone, or having, sorry, interruption there. Virtually all of us can recall doing something with a group as teenagers that we would never have done alone, or having friends who did so. Consequently, many parents lie awake at night waiting for their teens to come home, haunted by visions of what they got up to themselves as teenagers, now realising how stupid it was to accept the dare to jump off a cliff into the lake or start smoking because your best friend looked cool doing it. So Alison gets into trouble because she gets involved in a gang cornering and beating up a girl, is that right? Mm-hmm. And she's kind of on the periphery of this. Just going to zoom in onto a section here of Alison's after the event where she was involved. Now, she claims at first she only did shouting, but then she said she did hit her, and she's overcome with remorse and distress about what she'd done. At the time, she'd felt virtually nothing for her victim. In fact, she said she didn't even see Lena, this was the victim, as a person. On reflection, that made no sense to her. She couldn't really remember any thoughts at all. She said, still having difficulty believing that she'd taken part in a fight or that had hurt someone so badly. She'd always seen herself as kind and caring. How could she have done something like that? Lena had never done anything to hurt her. Bruce tried to explain some of the research about the power of groups to her, hoping to help Alison understand and face up to her behaviour. Now, this is the brain bit, the biological basis for the behaviour, okay? In adolescence, the brain regions involved in empathy are undergoing remodelling and growth. Teens, particularly in groups, are often less empathic than adults. You see it in the news every day. There's teens going up and down the canal at the minute, robbing bikes off people. They're quite violent, they're quite threatening. It is still happening. It takes them longer to consider the effects of their actions on others, and their frontal areas involved in empathy and planning in adults are less active when teens make moral choices. That's a little bit of a tangle, that sentence, but it just means the frontal areas involved in empathy and planning are less active. Okay? Understanding how empathy depends on group membership offers further insight. One marker of group membership is often race. A recent study compared reactions of white and Chinese people to images of people of both races. In one picture, a white woman was shown in a painful situation, her cheek pierced by a hypodermic needle. The alternate showed a white woman being touched on the same cheek with a Q-tip. Virtually identical pictures of Chinese women in these situations were also shown. The subjects were asked to rate how much pain they thought the woman might be experiencing in each situation. So their responses were identical. Both white and Chinese people gave the needle picture the same pain rating regardless of the woman's race. But when Chinese subjects saw the Chinese woman being pierced, their brain's anterior, I don't know how to pronounce that, so I'll give it my best shot, cingulate cortex was much more strongly activated than when they saw the white woman in pain. Now, they report seeing the same pain, but the brain responded differently. The same was true for white people. When they saw the white woman suffering, this region was not activated at all in the Q-tip pictures, nor did any subjects rate that as painful. The anterior cingulate is important for perceiving the emotional aspects of pain and is known to be activated when people empathize with others in pain. So although people consciously recognize the pain of people in other races, this research suggests that brain regions involved in less conscious emotional reactions are more highly tuned to pain among people of their own race. Now, that does not mean somebody's racist. Can I just stress that? It is how we're wired, and it's an evolutionary trait for survival. But it is an interesting study that would explain the key issue that Alison had, if you like, is that she was getting into trouble because of her involvement in groups. And I suppose being more vulnerable because she was solitary. I don't think she had siblings, did she? It doesn't say whether she had siblings. It would be interesting to find out, just to check back on the story for that. But this made her more vulnerable. Again, you can't excuse the behaviour, but you would wonder, I think you would be a little bit more understanding of it. And so I actually do wonder, does the psychology inform the legal response to such events? That would counselling be chosen above some kind of sentence or fine? Anyway, it just is an interesting link as well, how psychology could be related to the response to criminal activity. I hope this is filming. This is Keith. I'm just going to show you, we're going to double up here. This is word processing as well. If you go to the review tab and turn track changes on, that's a toggle button. It goes on and off. You can start, and what it does is it records the input that I've put into it, okay? On biological basis of behaviour, thoughts and emotions and reciprocal relations. Okay, here's what I'm suggesting. And well done, don't think I'm being harsh, because I know I told you to do this the last time, but this is what editing is about, is that you go in, you've progressed it on. I'm just going to delete that. And I'm going to consider what we might say about Alison in terms of a more specific part of the understanding of the biology. So I should really put this in as a comment, but I'll just put it, okay, you can focus on biological explanations given in the chapter. Sorry. Too many bits and pieces here. So I think it starts at the top of 186. I have ordered books, so they should be coming. the paragraph starts Ash and Milgram. So if you go Control F for find and Ash and Milgram, you'll find it. Okay? Control F and then type in Ash and Milgram. Is Ash with a H? I don't know if that E is in there or not. Oh, there's no E. Thinking of Arthur Ashe. So there are two. I'm not going to write them down here, but the video will be shared to the entire two classes. Okay, is that all right? Yeah. So no plagiarism, guys. But there are two things in that story. One is the idea of the teenage brain, and the other is that specific study with the Q-tip. Now again, you don't have to explain the study in detail. You don't have space for this on there. You could give the reference, okay, and then if you can find a video showing it, even better, put that link in. But if you just simply say, this study showed that unconsciously, that this anterior cingulate cortex is more active when you see someone the same race as you. So we're kind of programmed to have more empathy for the same, so who we see as the same. And it's not to say that is not within our control, do you know what I mean? They both reported that the reporting of how much pain the person felt in the picture in that study was the same, whatever the race was. So they weren't actually reporting any different perception. But unknown to them, there was more activation going on. It doesn't mean they were less empathic to the different race. It just meant that their brain seemed to recognize the other race more alertly. And that area is linked with empathy as well. Just pause there. I think all of you need to pay attention in your posters that when you're doing the perspectives, honestly, the hardest bit is to link it with the case study. But there is brilliant material in there on the biological basis, which is easy to grab. The psychodynamic perspective, which Keith chose, that's also okay. Unconscious desire, to fit in. Maybe some mention of the superego and how that might be seen as that. You can also change perspective if you decide, I think that's, like, the evolutionary is a perspective. Evolutionary perspective is a perspective in psychology that attempts to explain behavior in terms of adaptive behavior for survival. Okay? Very closely linked to both the psychodynamic and biological, actually. But anyway, I'm just going to minimize this here. I'm going to go back to my page and just look at one last study that was in that to see if we can link it. After viewing the videos, this is, I want to go down to the bottom. There's a bit there about a study where team membership was obvious in one with the kit that they were wearing, and then without the kit, that people tended to group people by race, okay? That's a very lazy summary, but anyway, group loyalty is thus more flexible and fluid than might initially seem. Another study that supports this idea looked at fans of rival English football teams, Man United and Liverpool. Team and city loyalty is taken seriously there. Liverpudlians and Mancunians have historical resentments against each other, and injuries and even deaths have resulted from football-related conflicts. Not surprisingly then, after a discussion about the merits of their own team, Manchester fans were more likely to later help an injured person wearing a Man United t-shirt than they were to help someone wearing Liverpool's shirt or unbranded shirt. But here's the interesting part. If the fans were first told to consider their overall love for football as a sport, they were equally likely to help fans of either team, but not those wearing just plain shirts. Alison's own case is a good example of how race can fall in importance in face of familiarity and group solidarity, at least to some degree. She had been unusual as a white member of a Latina gang, clique. Note the spelling of clique, by the way, it's not clique. But she had been fully accepted, at least by the junior members. They would never have enlisted her for their attack on Lena otherwise. However, when the younger girls had taken her to meet their hardcore sisters and cousins, they'd made clear that as a white girl, she wasn't welcome. So what they're saying there is that you're in, then you're out, that it's not very stable. Going back to the football idea, if you have ever been to a Premier League football match, it is very interesting the fear that you feel when confronted with, like I went to see Chelsea, I'm an Arsenal fan, but I went to see Arsenal and Chelsea play the semi-final of the FA Cup in Wembley and had asked for seats in the Arsenal area. I was placed in the midsection, so there's 3 tiers kind of thing going up the building. I was placed in the midsection, and so they were mixed. You didn't know who you could be sitting beside. A Chelsea fan, you could be sitting beside. It was aimed to be a kind of friendly, neutral area. And Arsenal scored first, and myself and the person with me jumped up. We'd hidden our shirts at that point, and we roared, and like we were exposed as Arsenal supporters. And it was it was frightening. Do you know what I mean? There was this thing of group belonging. In the end, what happened was Chelsea won, so they did give us a hard time, and it was actually a very pleasant atmosphere, very humorous. But on the way out, the Arsenal fans started singing a chant about, who was he? I keep forgetting his name, but is it either Lampard or, I don't think it's Lampard, John Terry, I think, that's singing chants about his mother being a shoplifter. And I turned to Tony and I just said, that's terrible. That's a bit personal. They can't be telling lies like that. And he said, oh no, she was good. But that can kick off, like violence can kick off in those situations so easily. It's just a strange atmosphere. It is a strange atmosphere. But a lot of work has been put into trying to reduce that. A lot of police presence. But anyway, I digress again. I'm just going to pause there. Now, what I want to advise you to do is whatever stage your poster is at, if you can revisit it and do what I did there and kind of read more in depth the studies that are in it, identify the perspective that they are coming from, and in that way kind of decide on your perspectives. It kind of makes more sense. I think they're fine though, Keith. What you chose is fine. So I'm going to stop there, or this will be edited later.